All right, that should be us live then. So this is us back for our second of 3 live streams that we're going to be doing for Strangers in Paradise as our read along, which is something that Blackpool and I kind of discussed a little while ago and decided, along with Angshman, that we were going to try and get some guests on for. Unfortunately, we haven't managed to get as many guests as we would like, but we do have Gore Vidal on with us today. So it's nice to have you on again, Gore.
Good to see you guys. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday.
And today, what my general plan was, just for the sort of audience, is last time round, I've kind of linked in the description below the previous chats. If anybody wants to go back and watch that, you can kind of do that as well. But last time round, we kind of covered things as a sort of general impressions, where we're kind of coming in, that kind of stuff. What I'd like to do today is kind of focus a little bit more on the actual story beats of what we read this time. But I want to do a little bit of a recap of what that kind of entailed from last time, because we didn't necessarily focus on the story beats last time. So if I just jump into where we are, people might not know exactly where we're kind of at. So I think it's nice to do a quick kind of recap of just generally what we kind of read last time. So my understanding was that we were reading roughly 35 issues in 3 chunks, if that's right, Blackpool. Yeah.
Yeah, right around their own 700 pages or so each section.
So the stopping point was around issue 19 of volume 2, or just the start of the Sanctuary arc that we finished last time round. And there was a lot to kind of cover in there, but I just want to kind of just give a general kind of overview of things. So we met our sort of main 2 or 3 sort of characters, being Kachu and Francine and David, I guess, being the kind of main 3 kind of going in the kind of love triangle of things. We learned quite a lot about Kachu has ties to the Parker Girls, which is this kind of espionage organization who have been trying to control various governments, change things behind the scenes, kind of basically manipulate politics in the world from their own kind of perspective. And just the tail end of that arc was when Kachu and Tambi, a few others to do with that kind of organization, had just kind of overthrown it. And we were kind of hitting that point where it's like, what kind of happens next now? Is it actually taken out? Is it completely kind of, demolished? Is anybody else going to kind of take it over? Where are we going to kind of be from there? And then we've also had a lot of relationship stuff up until now. So we've had a lot of the sort of will they, won't they back from Francine and Kachu. But there's also been a relationship with David and Kachu, which is similar in a way that Kachu's kind of giving everything to Francine. David was kind of giving everything to Kachu. It's kind of a little bit one-sided relationships in the first sort of section of the story a little bit. And then we had a lot of slice of life stuff with Francine and her previous partners, and just things that haven't kind of gone right in her life as well. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to kind of mention from what we kind of read last time.
Well, I think... Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to note that we did make a point about how we all read it in different formats. So those reading in the trades would have a certain kind of milestone approach. And Damien, who's not on this stream today, and I, unfortunately, were reading it in these omnibuses in the slipcase, which have no chapter breaks, no covers in between, and no titling. And so we were just on a long journey, not knowing exactly where we're supposed to go. And I think the experience Gore and Blackpool you had would be slightly different as well. So that is also, I think, a little worth noting, that when we say how far were we supposed to get, each one of us had a different idea of what that was.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, I think that's fine too, right? Like, I don't think since we're dividing it out into 3, we're going to eventually get through the whole thing. And like, I had the same thing. I mean, I've got the 4 volumes, the new ones that had come out just a couple of years ago, and they're the same way. They don't have any chapter breaks. I don't know, like, this was volume 3 arc, whatever. Like they kind of break it down. Like Highland G's got the trades. So I was the same thing. It was just like, well, okay, I'm going to read about 700 pages and I'll end. And it's a little bit flippant for me just because of the fact that I've read it already. So, but for the love of comics, obviously he went like above and beyond last time and read like an extra 300 and some pages. So I know,
right.
You're way ahead of the
game.
game.
For it. No, I made up for it this time by slacking off. So it's either a drought or a flood with me. So unfortunately, because of other things and because of me losing track of time, this time I've fallen a little short of where I think we should have gotten by part 2. And I'm going to be coasting on my over reading from the previous episode and then sort of leaving it up to you gentlemen to take it from there.
Well, and I think what might be kind of kind then is to like when we start to get to the spot where you haven't read to, maybe we should start to pull back a little bit if you can let us know. I don't like spoiling anything for anybody with this story. So if we get to start to get into some territory where maybe you haven't got to yet, maybe we can be light on our spoilers to keep it fresh for you.
Wow, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, just remembering kind of looking, I need to look over my notes, but I don't think there's a huge amount of things that happen in the last arc that we were reading compared to certain points where things change quite drastically. You were saying that there wasn't any breaks in the omnibuses. They're not even breaks for like the overall like trade chapters. Like there's not like so you don't get like the bit that says like like Sanctuary or Child of Rage or whatever the kind of chapter names are.
Nope, there's none of that in those.
Yeah, it's just like whatever little text block punctuation existed in the stories. I would just sort of have to assume. And also because of the cliffhanger nature of some of these stories, where I would see that page and it would be a splash, and I was like, this is probably the end of an issue, and it's going to be another issue. But which issues, and this is something I guess we can talk about, how these stories sort of flow into each other, that even if you said that there is an arc, there are threads that run throughout. And Gore Vidal was making an excellent point about how long certain things gestate and then come to fruition later. The story is so full of these things. I think that also interferes with an easy blocking of this is that arc and this is this arc. It's just like it could be anything because these tendrils of story are sort of creeping in and out constantly, which is it was a sort of giddying experience, but it does make it hard to measure against other readers, where you've gotten to and where I've gotten to. It's purely plot. Like it's like, oh yeah, so the beach chapter, or where they go, like we have to talk about specific plot points, rather than refer to things in arcs the way that we would with things that we're all reading in trades, for example.
Yeah, and as I found that even within the arcs being kind of separated out, it felt more like the titles were more like themes than like closed off arcs as such. Because as you said, you might get 2 or 3 arcs that read as one overall kind of story. So for this time round, we were reading, it would be, if we're talking single issues, it would be volume 2 and roughly issues 20 through 54, I think. Or if you were reading it in the trades, it would have been the second half of volume 7 through 12, which is what I read.
Well, I wanted to add something to what you guys said. Is I think when Moore decided to do it, put the Omni together regarding those story arcs, I found interesting that a story arc that is going to come up in our next discussion, which is basically, I think it's the issues that are coming up, which is, they're titled, there's 3 stories, and they're called David's story. Now, in the comic, those issues, I think, are 60, 61, 62, and 63, I think. However, Moore doesn't have those until the end of volume 2. And it's interesting that he decided to put that at the end of the trade and not continue here. And again, this is David's story. One, I don't know, have you guys read David's story at this point? You would remember. That's what it's
not in this read through, but we've read it previously, 2 of us.
Okay. So David's story appears shortly after this. This discussion we're going to have today. It happens not immediately after, but a few issues into it. And however, it's a background about David. It's about who he, his when he was a teenager, and it's one of the best stories that Moore has written in Strangers in Paradise. It's very powerful. It's very moving, and it's very insightful into David. It helps you understand him a lot. But it's interesting that he decided to take that out and put it at the end of the series. And I don't know why he touched on maybe he wants to follow certain themes. And this one did not follow what happens previous to those issues.
Hey, Gort, do you have a like from your read through both ways? Do you have a preference? Do you want it in the where it originally came, or do you like it more of where Moore put it?
I have some of the trades, and I have a good stack full of the individual issues, and I have the omnis, obviously. And thinking about it, I'd rather read it as a comic. I'd rather read it as a comic. The comic seems to have a little bit more information, seems to have more of a. Each issue has its own little microcosm, so to speak, its own world, right? And while this big monster here, it's just like a soap opera that you wake up in the morning, or telenovela. It's just going.
Yeah.
It's just endless, right? And then again, he has these choices here. And also, I sent you guys an email regarding an issue. This is issue 54. This is, I think, where we stop. And you see this here. This is a wonderful picture here. And there's some panels here without any words in the Omni. But in the comic, they're littered with words because they're littered with the lyrics of a song by Sting. And it's very moving. It really is, because I knew that song. So when I saw this, I knew that song by Eva Cassidy, that interpretation by Eva Cassidy. And so when I got to that, like, wow, Moore really knows how to hit you. However, you're not going to get that here. You just have these panels without any words. So probably a copyright issue, I'm thinking. Here he was able to do it, and here he couldn't do it. So
I think we need to have a group field trip to Terry Moore's house for some of these, to address some of these questions. I will bring some beer. Somebody else brings some steak. We'll get together and have a little talk.
At the very least, we should reach out to him over YouTube, because he's active on YouTube, and Gore has been kind enough to share some links of his videos as well.
He used to be on Blue Sky, and he was actually in Italy last year. He hasn't been real active on there recently, but he actually was replying back to just random posts I would put out there and ask him a question, stuff like that. So he's real interactive with his fans. I get the sense that the videos Gore shares from his channel, where he seems real personable, I feel like that's his true self coming through, at least from my experience of chatting with him on Blue Sky.
Yeah, I checked that out in the digital trade as well, by the way, Gordon. It's not in that either. It's just got the one image.
Interesting. Oh man,
so it doesn't have that full section that you had with all the lyrics around it. And
that's annoying. What was that issue? And
so it must have just been in the singles, and as you said, there must have been some sort of copyright issue with it.
It has to be. If I can find it here. Here we go. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Yeah. But it does also make me wonder, when you put that together with the fact that they put David's story at the end of the arc, I'm wondering if maybe he felt David was too much of a focus during the story. He wanted to kind of push him to the side a little bit. I don't know. Because if you read with all that in there, and you read with David's story where originally was and things like that, he becomes so much more vital to the overall kind of story as things are kind of happening. But when you start taking his moments out and putting them towards the end, he still gets his recap, but then he becomes less one of the trio. It kind of gets pushed to the side a little bit.
We mentioned about going to see Terry Moore in Houston. one of the questions, I guess, if we invaded his house, his wife would probably kick us out, but, is when he invented David, when they meet at the museum, right? That wonderful scene is that he have this really remarkable story arc for David. Because when you meet him, though, you're thinking, what is this guy doing in here?
Yeah.
He says, you like Kachu, you find Francine interesting, all the characters, but David is just, okay, so who is this guy? And even the way he's drawn, he's kind of like a nerdy guy, glasses, little hair. He's very polite. He's kind of a little bit shy and such. And however, once you know his background, he's not that. Well, he is that guy.
Yeah.
But he was also he's also someone else.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot in common with Kachu.
Yeah.
A lot in common. That's something in my reread I missed the first time. When I read the first time, how much they're similar, how smart they are, how they're terrible backgrounds, more specifically for Kachu, but they have a conscience. They easily could have gone another direction, be embittered by life, which with Kachu, it kind of, there's points there, but she's always stays the course. And maybe Francine is that constant star for her.
Yeah.
Of that there's good in this world. And with David, she realizes there's good in this world, although David's Darcy's brother, right? And at first she's skeptical of him, but she proves that he's very almost he is a Christian, but he does embody up until this point the best part of what a Christian is. New Testament Christian, not the Old Testament. We all know the distinction, right? And he's just a very humane person, and Kachu has that too. So in any event, that David's story is just remarkable.
Yeah. So as I said, I've kind of split the sections out a little bit just so that I could make bullet points while I was kind of reading this time of anything that kind of like either stood out to me or key kind of things within the kind of arcs. Again, like I did the kind of quick recap at the start, there might be things that I missed or things that didn't stand out as much to me in the arc, but that's the opportunity for us to kind of discuss. So the first arc is called Sanctuary. I don't know that you guys know these titles, but that's what it's called. And that's where we kind of stopped midway last time and picked up this time. So that arc basically starts with a flash forward to the a possible future of Francine, and she's not happy in the marriage that she's in at that point in time. There's a kind of come back to kind of normal time story, and there's a whole bunch of things going on with Kachu in the art gallery and her wanting to paint in certain kind of ways and things like that. And her and Francine have quite an argument about the difference between sort of painting what you want to see and kind of putting things on people, and painting what you see in someone, but maybe they don't necessarily know that you see, or you're kind of seeing deeper. And they have that kind of like back and forth a kind of bit. Francine notes that she's read Kachu's file, which is a big thing. It's her FBI file that she had hidden, and that let out a lot of kind of stuff. They have an art exhibition at which Francine gets even more annoyed and ends up kind of leaving. And we find out that David has inherited all of the money from Darcy's stuff. He's in the process of getting the power side of things, but he has the money. And then there's a bunch of stuff back and forth between Freddie and is it Cassie, however you say that. There's a lot of stuff back and forth between them, because he's obsessed with these paintings and stuff of Francine, and Casey's gone out of her way to do everything she can, down to like plastic surgery on her body to make him happy, and yet he just doesn't want her. So we have this sort of interesting connection of how you have Francine and Kachu, where Kachu's trying to get Francine's connection, kind of attention. Freddie's trying to get Francine's attention, Casey's trying to get Freddie's attention, and David's trying to get Kachu's attention. And you've got all this kind of going on kind of simultaneously. But that's that main kind of arc overall. So it's mostly around the possible future and the art exhibition, and that David basically finally gets the money. I can't remember if it's in this arc or the arc next, but there's a brief conversation that he also has with Francine where he gives her some money, and she kind of puts it aside for the future for kind of kids.
Yeah. What Freddie's got one of the paintings of Francine above his couch, basically in his home. You imagine Casey coming home, be like, "What the hell is that?" Like, you're supposed to be married to me. I love that. But yeah, what David ends up with like $1.4 billion, and just ends up giving Francine 10 million of it.
10,
yeah, it's pretty crazy everything that went on with that. That was one of the things I really like about that arc, though, is that first when there was that discussion between Francine and Kachu about this painting, one of the things I like is that it's what good friends really do. Kachu's like, Francine doesn't see her beauty, and Kachu really points it out in some of those panels and really gets her to kind of understand how she sees her versus how Francine sees her. I just remember thinking, yeah, this is what good friends do. They can help us see our shadows, good or bad. And in this case, when Francine doesn't think she's beautiful, pointing that out to her, I thought was just a really cool scene.
Yeah, that's I think in our last discussion, I think I read part of that for Francine, and she says, "You changed me, Kachu. I thought I knew who I was, but I'm not who I thought. But I'm not who I thought I was or thought I'll be. Now your paintings scare me because you see someone I don't know yet."
That's beautiful.
That's wonderful. And of course, what happens in Sanctuary, though, is initially, though, when Kachu has these paintings in the gallery, which are very beautiful paintings, but again with Francine, she's still not comfortable with herself and also with these paintings. It reminded me of, I think that she was so angry at Kachu initially, is because I think it reminded her probably what happened when she was in high school, and she had that accident where she's disrobed in front of the audience. And now that was an accident, or maybe Freddie had something to do with it, but now Kachu's doing the same thing, but this is actually maybe worse because it's actually very intimate, because in a way Kachu is revealing to the world indirectly how she feels about Francine, and it's like proclaiming your love for somebody to all these strangers, which is a very intimate thing, and it can be offensive. That's why she has this horrible reaction to Kachu, and they have one of their first of many separations. So this one doesn't last very long, but there's a huge fight.
Yeah.
One thing I was curious about, and especially for people who've read it before, what you felt the first time around with the flash forward, because we'd seen things start in the past and move forward, but then we're sort of in a main storyline, and we often have flashbacks. But the flash forward to me was something stunning, and it was so interesting because it made you feel this pathos of the distance and the gap between these characters, even though we'd just seen them together. And so therefore it was like such an unusual but wonderfully effective way to do it. It's like I'm trying to think about how many flash forwards I've experienced in cinema and in books and comics, and how many of them have been really good, apart from being a gimmick or, like gotten, this might be the best one, or it's definitely one of the best ones, if not the best one, for the way it uses that, not just for impact, but for storytelling and character. Like, you saw these people together, you've always seen them together, and then in the 2 pages later, they haven't met for 10 years, and you're like, I can feel, and then when they do reconnect, when they do again meet each other, we feel this, or at least I felt this emotional welling And I'm like, but I haven't been a part, or I haven't thought of them as a part for 10 years. I was just with them a few pages ago and they were together. So to be able to conjure that within me as a reader, I thought was just a masterful, storytelling by Terry Moore.
No, good point. I know that is very insightful, and that is true. It does read like a novel or like a film that it's something you would normally see, not normally see, but you would see that. And you're right. When it's not done right, it's terrible. But I guess what stays in my mind is that porch scene 10 years forward when they reunite and they're sitting on the porch, and the way Terry Moore draws the wrinkles on the side of the eyes, you can tell that they've aged, and also not just because of age, right? But also their internal aging of being some kind of emotional pain. And then when Francine asks, "Well, how's David?" and at that point, Francine and Kachu goes silent, and she looks like she's torn up about something, and we don't know what she's referring to. But you're right, because we already are invested in these characters. We really care for them. We feel for them. He does such a wonderful job in text and in pictures, But the comic medium is just so beautiful because, Terry Moore or the great writer artists, they're the director, they're the writer, they're the cinematographer, they're the editor. They are everything. And they put it there on that paper. And they just have complete control. And they can execute this, the ability to execute so brilliantly. So when you get to that page like that, sitting on the porch, just 10 years forward, you're thinking, oh my goodness, they've been apart that long? What happened? Oh my. And what's happened to Francine? What? He's falling apart and and what happened to David? And he doesn't address this. I think, it's going to be addressed way later, but yeah, so it's just wonderful. Good point.
It's a great means of creating some tension in the reader.
Yeah.
And it also pointed back to my mind went to that 10-year jump forward was can't imagine them being apart at all. That's how much they mean to each other and how they're two sides of the same coin. They need to be together. And so when they're apart, it was just kind of a disbelief thing. That can't happen, But I think we've all experienced that too, where we've had a close friend or somebody and eventually it's drifted apart. So it's also something we can all resonate with.
Yeah, I also feel the kind of flashbacks and flash forwards kind of evolve a little bit over time. Like the first little bits of that you get earlier on are, for want of a better term, true step forwards or step backwards. Whereas as we kind of move on, they become more possible futures or just thoughts or worries people are having or various other different reasons that they might need to, describe something in a certain kind of way. So you're kind of getting this insight from in their head, what they're thinking, what their worries are, that kind of thing, rather than it being necessarily a true jump in time. And I think that's really interesting how it kind of evolves that kind of over time. I would say though, just a small niggle from my perspective, similarly to not having the page numbers and things, I would personally have liked some sort of indication as to when the sort of flash forward backs start and stop, because there are a couple of occasions where it's literally a couple of panels, flashback or something, and I've missed it and I've been wait a minute, that doesn't line up, and then I've realized afterwards, oh okay, that was a flashback or whatever it was. But it would be nice just to know, just some tiny indication to go this is not in the current timeline. Just personally.
I always wonder about those, because I think there are definitely some in which that's absolutely intentional. You want the reader to kind of get shocked or something. And I think that happens early on in one of the sections we discussed in our last conversation as well, where you're just oh my God, she's found her. And you're no, this is before she ran away from her, you have that one moment of recognition and, just before that recognition kicks in, you have that one moment of panic, or you have that one moment of oh my God, now what's going to happen? because these are people who have been hunting her. And then you're like, no, this is before they started hunting her. And it just takes you that. I like that 1 second, but I do agree that there are certain times in which that befuddlement can sort of get in the way. But I think as a writer artist, if you're really shooting for a certain elegance, then those are the risks that you have to take, because you don't want to spoon feed. There's always going to be a danger of losing some of your readers because you don't want to be that explicit. And I think walking that balancing act, but I know what you mean, Highland G, because it also reminds me of one of the early Maggie and Hopi stories in Jaime Hernandez's Locas things, in which you would switch and you would just go back to a moment when they were lying in bed together talking to each other, and it isn't actually then, and it would be kind of confusing, and you'd need to read about a page more to realize, no, that was just a memory. Something she said now reminded her of something she had said before, and then you come back to it, and there's an artistry to it, but I agree, there is a danger to it that comes hand in hand with that artistry, I think.
I agree.
Yeah. I think there's also an element when you're juggling so many characters that I think I mentioned this a little bit last time, that it's kind of pieced together in a way rather than something that might have been written in a completely kind of linear form like this. As a reread, is reminding me a lot of reading Stepan Sedgwick's Sunstone, where when he wrote Sunstone, he wrote it in a lot of shorts and put it online, and then he took all the shorts and put them together and made a comic out of it. And like, it reads really well, but there's no real start and stop points. Like, it is just one kind of flowing kind of story with all these different characters and different kind of jump back and forths and kind of stuff like that. Obviously that book's in full color and it's a completely different story to this, but just the overall not quite traditional way of assembling a comic story is quite interesting.
I think it's, I don't know, maybe it could lead into the next volume, My Other Life, in the sense that we so we know something has happened to David 10 years forward, and then it's not addressed, but then this love triangle where David is in love with Kachu is in love with Francine can't admit to herself completely that she's in love with Kachu, but she knows she needs Kachu. So you have this triangle here. And at the end, I think of Sanctuary, there's another fight between Kachu and Francine, and Kachu and David. I think they're going to New York on a plane, and it's not a good scene between them. The partying is bad, and Kachu says, "David's here for me. He loves me," and so they leave, and then the plane is booby trapped by one of the Parker girls, Veronica, and then when I read that, the explosion and the crash, like, oh my, and how he did this with the crash, and then you feel for Francine when she gets the news, and the parting between her. I know I have friends, for example. I give them a hard time. There's a couple, they've been together for a long time. But whenever they part, they always say, "I love you." I mean, no matter what, they're going down the street for like 5 minutes and they come back, "I love you." And I go, "Why do you say that so much?" Well, I may never see them again. Yeah. I don't want them, and I may feel bad that I didn't tell them I love them. So for them, it's very meaningful to do that. And so anyway, so the next one here is these characters are already so well developed that you really feel for them. And when that plane crash occurs, and is Kachu dead? Is David dead? And you see it from the perspective of Francine and then people who care for these people. It's a very powerful. This chapter here, what's called My Other Life, is just really well done.
Yeah, I mean, like you've basically covered what my notes were for that overall kind of chapter. The only other thing that I noted is there's a kind of beach trip at the start, so everything kind of like goes lightened for a little bit, and you've got this kind of lighter tone of the beach trip before they go off on that kind of flight. And then the other thing that I would note is that Francine doesn't find out Francine's literally with Casey, I believe, and she feels that Kachu's hurt.
Yeah, that's right.
And has like a physical reaction and goes, I know something happened. She goes, how do you know something happened? I just know. Like that's powerful.
Yeah. And I'm going to be curious to hear what For the Love of Comics is his first time through. So I was expecting this, but I remember the first time I read it, it's this, we've got this slice of life love story with the espionage. And then I think it's on a page turn when the plane goes down. And I was just like stopped in my tracks the first time you and I read it, Highland G together. I was just like, holy crap. Like you don't, like you said, you don't know if David's alive still. And the plane goes down. I'm like, this just took a really different turn from the rest of this story. And, Gort, you're right on that we find out that the Parker girls were trying to take down, they kill 144 people to try to get to Kachu just to take her out. They're going to this extreme. We don't find that out for a few issues later, right? There's all the stuff dealing with the plane crash and Francine's in Tennessee back home and stuff like that. But I'm really curious about, For Love Comics, like what was your impression being a first time read through with this one when that plane, those images?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that beach episode really stands out later as being a necessary respite because there was an arc that came before, and then there is this thing that comes after it, and it's just like it's a sort of one episode in the middle to catch your breath and it's purposely goofy and it's purposely got his whole. It's in Archie comics. I mean, like a lot of this is Archie comics, but that them at the beach is definitely Archie comics right there. And it's got this whole Archie, Betty, Veronica. It's got all of this comedy going on in it, and then you go to this, and I realized later why that was necessary. And I know that Terry Moore hasn't thought this all out and planned everything, but it seems so thought out. It seems so elegantly calibrated that I find it sometimes hard to believe that he's just making the stuff up as he goes along. I really don't. Right. I mean, it's not like I doubt it, but it's like it doesn't feel that way at all. And I think he's reading his stuff and then he's building, like, even if he just had an idea to do something, like she shoots her alarm clock, I'm like, oh, this is the kind of comic it's going to be. I have these expectations with all of these things that come up, and they're all sort of defied. And I'm like, oh, you can't just attack a cop. And they're like, yeah, you can't just attack a cop. That's going to be a deal. That's going to be a really big deal. So all of these doubts that I had in my mind, they've been treated so carefully and they've been given so much attention that when the plane went down, I was like, okay, this is where it jumps the shark. Like that was my first reaction. I was just like, this is like asking me to I'm like, I've bought all your mafia stuff. I've bought all your government conspiracy. I've bought all of this stuff. But now this is the plane that happens to go down. Like this happens when they go and she didn't go with them. I mean, like now you're really stepping into very, and that's saying something, to step into very soapy territory given the, whatever 600 pages we've had before that. But the artwork over there and the pages you were showing, Gore, I mean, they were phenomenal. I was reminded of the Peter Weir movie Fearless with Jeff Bridges and Rosie Perez about, it starts with a plane crash, but you don't see the crash, you just see the aftermath of it. And it starts with Jeff Bridges sort of walking through the corn, and he's just got a little girl whose hand he's holding, and they just keep walking and they keep walking, and then finally they part the corn and they see this devastation and this swath cut into the corn with the column of smoke rising. I mean, it's been literally decades since I've seen that movie, so I could be misremembering it, and then the beginning of Lost, I thought, was paying homage to Fearless in that way, with a lot more Hollywood. But that it felt like that sadness and that gravitas and that landscape being portrayed in that way. I wondered, if there was any connection, but there was very reminiscent. But I also thought that recovery to bring me back into the story, to say that it's not just a sheer coincidence, that it actually is connected to this large conspiracy, pot boiling, mafia, Parker girl storyline. I was like, okay, I shouldn't have doubted you, Mr. Terry Moore. I mean, like, you're going to do that. The only thing I will say though, and this is for me as a reader, like, while that was mitigated and very well recovered, I did think that the fake out that David dies and then he's not actually dead, and then that took me a little bit longer because I really thought that it was being written as if he dies in her arms, and then I was just like, that's where I went. I was like, wow, this story has now just removed one of the three major characters in it in a way that none of the other deaths or other removals so far compared. And I was then sort of in that zone. And then later I see that he's in the hospital. Of course, I think even that was mitigated to a certain extent quite well, because the length of his recovery and the nature of what that did to him and what it did to the relationships and the chemistry and all of those things were very well played. But I think I was irritated with the plane crash, but I was overcome by the beauty of its presentation and then the sadness of his dying. And then the plane crash was explained. But the fact that he didn't die, I think maybe stuck in my teeth a little bit more. Maybe there's a splinter of that still as a slight dissatisfaction, just given how much emotional response it wrung out of me when I thought that David had died.
This is the regarding Moore. Yes, this has to be a master plan that he has, because going back to this issue, that's a cornfield, right? And issue 54. This is basically it's I don't know if it's a cornfield, but you got me thinking. And there's that song by Sting, and it says, "You'll remember me when the west wind moves upon the fields of barley. You'll forget the sunshine, jealous sky, as we walk in fields of gold." And this is a memory that David is having. It's a memory that David is having after all these events, and he's remembering Kuchu. And yet he decided to have this song and this image. So when I got to this, I thought about that, the plane crash. And so it's just, it adds another layer, like you said, of pathos into this story, which there are so many in this book. And just when you think he can't hit you again, he just punches you in the heart. Ugly. Master, what he did.
Yeah, one thing I like that came out of this. So I mean, they're in Tennessee. Francine's at home, right? And in Tennessee with her mom, staying at her mom's house, and that's where the plane crash had taken place over as David and Kachu were flying to New York. But there's these really neat scenes I found between Francine's mom, Marie Peters, and Kachu, and this idea of like the consoling that went on at the horror that Kachu just went through. And it was like, this is the mother that Kachu never had. And and Miss Peters is standing in for that. And it's just it was so touching to me to see this, like, oh, Kachu is getting the love and the care that she needs in this moment. And she couldn't get it from her own family, but somebody else is giving it to her.
Yeah, see, for me, that arc didn't feel so much a fake out of his death as a challenge to the fact that Kachu, basically up until this point, should anything go wrong or mess up her life, she can go out and, for want of a better description, punch it better. That's basically how she's managed to fix anything that she can fix in her life, is to go all aggressive on it. Whether that's someone she loves shouting at them, or whether that's going and fighting somebody, like she's a woman of action, to try and kind of resolve things. So for me, it felt like her gradually having to accept that she didn't have control over whether or not David lived or died. So to begin with, we don't see him, and then we see her kind of find him, and then when she finds him, her and him both get kind of blasted out of the way, and then she's in the hospital and he's not there. Each of these moments is her realizing her lack of control, to me, rather than it being a fake out of his death as such. It felt more metaphorical of her having to be like, well, I can't control everything, because even David at that point was something in her life that she somewhat felt in control of. Like, he was there and he'd given everything to her, but she only let him in as much as she wanted, and she could kind of control those aspects. And now that he's potentially gone, and she can't control that, that's a big, kind of element for her. So I think this arc was more to develop her than to kill off him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously the way it comes out. I was just thinking about the page where the guy finds her cradling David, and he says, "Lady, are you okay? Were you on that plane?" And she's like in shock, and she's holding him, and she says, "No, don't touch him." And he says, "I think he might be dead." He's like, "No, no, he's only sleeping." It's got this whole the kind of thing we've seen before, but it feels like that hysteria or that that sort of mental collapse in a certain way. And she's like, he's just sleeping, he's dreaming dreams. And then she's like, dream sweet dreams. And that's where you pull out of that scene, with that sort of line, which seemed very much coded like an elegy. Like she's in shock and she's not accepting the fact that he's dead. And I thought that was the emotional thing. The reaction that I was getting was her not accepting that he has died. So the fact that he's not actually dead means that she wasn't not accepting. You know what I mean? There's like a retroactive thing to like, okay, so she was right. He isn't dead. He is just sleeping, And so therefore that scene's power is, that's what I felt when I found that he wasn't, is that scene's power is leached out a little bit, because that scene gets its power from her being unable to accept that he's dead, not just the fact that he's dead. And that power, I think, is what I meant when I was talking about. But of course, yes, you're absolutely right with the other scenes, and then what happens with the story later on. And that's why I think even that doesn't bother me now, because of how it actually ended up being about exactly the kind of things that you're talking about how she's going to have to deal with things, etc. But just that one thing was that, oh, that means that these words don't mean what I thought they meant when I read that page.
Yeah. I think there's also potentially an element of he doesn't know when or how long the story was going to run for. So maybe there was cut-off points where he might have killed off a character if the story ended at that point. Like, it just depends on how long it ran for. Could it affect if you need to keep characters in, or if you're going to kind of knock characters out of the story and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it was a real, probably the second biggest arc impacting to me, to when they kind of, the other arc so far was when they kind of overthrow the kind of big six, I think they call them, or something, which is kind of the bigger gangsters that run the cartels and things that have allowed the Parker girls to kind of exist up until now. They basically overthrow them and take the lot. Like, that big arc is probably one of the biggest ones for me. And then, as I said, this with David was the next biggest kind of impact point of, like, okay, because, like, if you do think just from your own perspective, oh, okay, what if David isn't there kind of going forward, how does this affect things, what happens kind of next, what would happen in this story if David wasn't around?
And this arc, and maybe we're just a little bit past the David's in the hospital and he's going through rehab. Kachu leaves, we get that like year break, but this is the arc for me that also says David and Francine are friends without Kachu, because of all the rehab and all the time he has to spend at Francine's house. This was the one that solidified he wasn't just somebody after Kachu and that relationship there, but now that friendship level he has with Francine was just solid at that point. I was like, okay, now I feel like there is the triangle just got a little deeper, because there's now this deeper friendship here between those two, and I really enjoyed that part of it.
If you don't mind, I'm going to show the comics for this arc, and it's interesting how they break here. Okay, this is 26. This is the scene when you mentioned Highland G, that she's talking to Casey, and she feels something is wrong. And so this is towards the end of the comic, right? First, this is the cover, okay? And this is where we are.
Oh, I like that. No face on a groom.
Yeah, no face on the groom. And so now we have the plane. Things not going well, and then you have this here. That got Hyde and G's point about she senses something has happened, right?
Yeah.
And this is how it ends. It ends right here, and then you turn the page, the letters page. So this is the cliffhanger, right here. However, in the Omni, you jump right into the next page, the page of the next issue, which is this one here. You see that?
Yeah.
So for readers at the time, I think the comic came out every 6 weeks, I think, or every month or every 6 weeks. They had to wait a long time. And so the next issue, and this is the one, it's kind of hard to see, but it's a Kachu there in the cornfield. It's and it opens with the little girl.
Are you just messing with me, Gore Vidal? That just looks like a black cover to me.
It does. No, it's not. It's hard to see. You have to get closer there.
Yeah, no, I take your word for it. But to me, all I see is a reflection of
the
computer screen
or
something.
Hard to see. I'm sorry. Yeah, it is. No,
Yeah.
It's a picture of Kachu in short hair in tears after the plane crash.
Oh.
And so that one, the cliffhanger there is Francine's mother holding Kachu.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's issue 26, 27. And then we have issue 28. And basically now we get to the more Parker Girl stuff, right? And then issue 29, David.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then finally issue 30, the Parker Girls again. So anyway.
Wow. I think that's really incredible, what you just pointed out. It just makes, I mean, I got the sense, and Highland G, this gets back to what we were talking about right at the beginning. It's like this page is such a perfect example of how we who are reading it in these omnis, we have no pause whatsoever. Like this is the ending of, this is the ending of one issue. This is the start of another issue. There isn't even a white page between them. It's like you essentially go from her crying to the kid in the cornfield as, and it's on a left-hand side, right-hand side. So it's not even a page turn or anything like that. It's, so that's what one of those things, and I suppose it's just a different experience, but it's so fascinating to see Gore show us the single issues, because now I want to go through this omnibus and know where each of the issues ends, let alone the trades, because I think that kind of cliffhanger, I think it has an impact, and I think in many trades we get to have that impact, even if we wait for one more page to turn. Trades of Usagi or Jimbo will have a little colored page in between the issues, and that allows you that little one breathing room. It allows you that little bit of punctuation, and of course this has impact, but I can completely empathize with Damien. Like the problem we had is like, when do I take a break? Like when do I put it down and say that I'll read after dinner or something like that? It's like there doesn't seem to be any stopping point except for the one that you make of it, which I suppose also plays to that long flowing telenovela. But I mean, telenovelas have commercial breaks and episode breaks as well. This is just like, it's like a continuing story that you sort of tune into and then drop out of and tune into as you want to in these omnibuses. And on a slightly related note, I'd be interested in seeing what the new Dark Horse editions do with the Strangers in Paradise reprints, or the new editions that they're going to put out now that Terry Moore has an imprint with them. And did you hear? We talked about this last time, that there's going to be the new Dark Horse editions of these of these books and others in this world. So I'd be very interested in seeing what they do, because I really like the way they've put these Usagi and other omnibuses together. I'm still waiting for the concrete, Redux ones, but yes, I think they'll put some chapter breaks in. I think they'll definitely do that.
Wait, they're doing a concrete one?
No. I said that's the one I'm still waiting for. I'm waiting for the concrete to come back in a new hardcover deluxe edition formats that they've done for everything else except for concrete so far. It seems to be.
Yeah, I'd like to see an edition where they actually Terry Moore puts in a page at that and says, "Put down the book for 4 weeks and come back." No, I'm serious, because just the processing part, I can't imagine going. Because I didn't read it in single issue, so I couldn't imagine waiting 4 weeks to kind of find out what happens and how that would have affected how I think about it. And in our consumerism today, all 10 or 12 shows in the season are released, and there's no breaks. We don't get that time. So I imagine the impact was probably even more felt. Yeah.
I mean, I will say that it's singular in this case because I'm a trade waiter, I don't get singles. I don't have a weekly pull list. Most of the time I'm reading in trades, but there is a punctuation that you can use for yourself, even though you can gallop through it. When an issue ends. There's some sort of a design element.
Not in this story.
Yeah, well, I remember reading a Vertigo series like Preacher and Why the Last Man, and Why the Last Man was an absolute page turner. And I was galloping through those because it was so easy to read. It's only a question of when Brian K. Vaughan's going to come up for Gore Vidal's consideration over here. But with Fables and with 100 Bullets or whatever it is, that these things that I discovered only in trades and read only in trades, and they were sort of galloping reads. Whether they hold up or not is a different matter. But in this one, it was a kind of a galloping read, but it also had no punctuation between chapters, but it's also got an extreme level of density and a certain quality to its storytelling that is running consistent. That I don't want to keep saying about the irritation, because there is a different experience. There is a pleasure to it as well, where you're like, this world is turning whether I am the reader of it or not, which is a thing that I often like in comics, which is another thing I like about Love and Rockets. It's like they don't need me as a reader in order to exist. And that's really unique, rich storytelling. And that somehow that this is like, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to pause. I'm not going to give you 4 weeks in this format, even though the original comics would have had that format. There's something quite endearing, irritatingly endearing about it as well.
Yeah, and we also find out. So I'll just move along a little bit. We also find out in this one that the doctor in the hospital, this doctor turns out where Francine's mom kind of hooks up Francine with this doctor and pushes her, and eventually we get to the point where Francine's going to be engaged to this doctor, and so we have this new kind of twist added in. So there's like a year break, right? While David's recovering in Tennessee and Kachu's in New York, and we'll eventually find out that she's been, if I remember right, like helping buy up tech companies for the Parker girls, and I think these are the scenes where she's basically sitting around with a big pile of coke and a lot of alcohol, and is basically on this depressive, self-inflicted wound train down. And while that's going on, Francine and David are, David's rehabbing. Francine's there for that whole year. Francine's now engaged or getting engaged to this guy named Brad, who's a doctor, who's supposed to make, in her earlier years, this was going to be her dream come true, right? Marry a doctor, settle down, have a bunch of kids, and that's the happy life she lived. And yet none of them are happy.
It's interesting regarding Brad, because I think Kachu had something to do with her meeting Brad. The reason she's seen the doctor is because Kachu, I guess a little bit back here, is that at the hospital, Tampy shows up and tells Kachu, "You're going to join me. I have a plan to take over basically not just the Parker girls, but over this Secret Six organization. And you're going to help me." and you're going to have to leave Francine because Francine's going to be in danger in some way or the other. You're going to have to break with her. And this is a very powerful scene where Kachu just tells Francine off. She doesn't mean what she says, but she tells her, "I don't need you. Get out of my life." And it's a very powerful scene. And she ends up pushing Francine, and I think she bruises her rib. And then the doctor who treats her is Brad. But I want to remember that there's a scene in an earlier issue when Francine is leaving, I think, a museum or something, and she runs into a guy named Brad. I don't know if it's the same Brad, but they all have to do with Kachu. And then way in the future, later on, when Kachu realizes that she's engaged to Brad, and she goes, "How did you meet?" "Well, at the hospital when Francine came to see me." And it dawns on Kachu that, she had something to do with this. She had something to do with this man now is engaged to the woman she's in love with. And what's happened here is that now a year has passed, right? And now we're in the Child of Rage chapter. And we have to do with Veronica is, now we get Veronica front and center. A Parker girl who's even worse than Darcy. She's completely evil, and she's the one behind the bombing of the plane, the death of all these people, but Tambi needs Kachu, but she's been separated from Francine for about a year, and in order to motivate her, she brings in Francine. And right before Kachu and Tambi are about to make a major deal, take over basically all these organizations, and there's a limousine, and Kachu gets inside, and there is Francine, and they don't say a word. They just embrace. And I think one of them says, "I'm home." I think. Anyway, that's where we are. The death of Child of Rage.
Yes, there's quite a lot going on there. I guess I would clarify personally that what Kachu and Tambi are doing is, I think they go by King Enterprises or Industries or something like that, to do all their techie stuff. Technically, did you say it's Veronica, I think her name is running the Parker girls, but she's not really a Parker girl. She was a cousin of Darcy who was used as a chauffeur or something, and somehow she's throwing her weight around to try and do things. So she's not a very controlled, not official leader of the Parker girls, doing some pretty messed up stuff. Meanwhile, what was the Parker girls, which is Tambi and Kachu, are doing this new thing because their whole idea is that if we can build up a big enough business that we then have to fold into the six, then we can trick them to actually fold their stuff into us, kind of thing. So that was really interesting. Also during this time, as soon as David kind of recovers, he goes off to try and find out what's happening with Kachu because he doesn't know where she's went and why she kind of went off. So he's off trying to kind of figure her out. She is doing all this sort of wheeling dealing type stuff, but she's not really enjoying it. She's gone right back to the dark side of herself with drugs and alcohol and all sorts of messed up stuff, kind of just to blank her brain from all the emotional stuff while she's kind of doing these things. So it's not exactly a positive time for Kachu. Something I also noted during this, which was something that I don't remember if I noticed the first time, but Tambi and Bambi are two different characters. And some of the things that you assume that Tambi done early on were actually things that Bambi done, and she ended up in prison for them, not Tambi. So they're sisters to this guy who's an assassin or something like that. So they've got their own kind of family interests. So it's the Darcy family interests.
It's his father.
But there's the Darcy family interests. There's the Tambi's family and Kachu's family's kind of interests, and then there's whatever David kind of wants to do, and there's all these kind of various things kind of conflicting, along with Veronica doing her own kind of stuff. So where we might have thought that it was a clean kind of knockout when Darcy was taken out has actually been left a lot muddier than we maybe initially thought. So like officially, all of this is supposed to be getting handed over to David power-wise, but it's still in limbo, and that's how Veronica's managed to power grab, I guess, in the kind of meantime, as an overall kind of thing. And then, as you said before, they pull in Francine to try and get Kuchu kind of like, you know, in the right mood for doing the kind of meeting, and the arc wraps up with them leaving the meeting and Francine's been kidnapped again.
Yeah. And I just want to mention, you know, you talked about how devious Veronica is compared to Darcy. We find out that she actually poisoned Emma with AIDS from way back in our first discussion. And it was like, wow. Yeah.
She claims that she caused a lot of stuff. And whether or not she did or didn't, we'll never 100% know. But yeah, if she did, then she was messing with things even while Darcy was in control.
Yeah.
Yeah, we learned these things about Veronica, and also on the plane earlier with Kuchu and Tambi. Tambi basically tells Kuchu about Emma. Emma says she saved you from the streets, but she was grooming you for Darcy. Because Darcy liked young girls, and she was going to ingratiate herself with Darcy. She didn't save you out of the goodness of her heart.
Yeah, she needed money for drugs.
Emma in a very sympathetic way, but now you're wondering.
Yeah.
So was she just using Kuchu? And so you get all these layers here. And then we get to this where Veronica, she basically gave AIDS basically to poor Emma, and because she's so angry at Kuchu and such. And so yes, you know, she gets kidnapped, and now we enter Modesty Blaze territory, because now we enter like the Modesty Blaze phase of Terry Moore, and now Kuchu and Tambi come to rescue David. Now they go to rescue Francine, and you know, and then we meet that one of the girls is I'm not sure, is it Becky? One of the girls is working, who's been working with Veronica, actually works for Tambi, and so Kuchu and Francine are reunited, but Kuchu doesn't know that Francine's engaged. And then we get to the scene where they come home to Francine's mom and such. They don't tell her what has happened to mom, and that's where she discovers that she's engaged, and it's you know, obviously it's devastating for Kuchu.
Yeah, I like part of that too. The next somewhere along the lines. I'm not, like I said, without having the trades, but somewhere along the lines, Francine finally gets up the guts to tell her mom and Brad, well, I don't know if I'm really in love with you. All right. Francine wants babies, but I don't know if I'm really in love with you. I don't know if this wedding's the right thing to do. And telling her mom, like, I may be in love with Kuchu. My love is deeper than just platonic, and I may have this. And that I thought it was really interesting because there's this religious scene, right? Francine's mom goes and invites the minister over, and they have this little conversation. And one of the things I liked about, I don't think I noticed it the first time through, but Francine just spills out right away. Like, yeah, I might be in love with another woman. Basically you're not going to understand, but I'm in love with another woman. Now you look back to the first half of the story, and Francine never wanted to kind of admit that to herself. She never wanted to say that, oh, what is it going to look like if I, like early on, what is it going to look like if I hold hands with Kuchu? Or what is it going to look like if I have this love? And I saw this like character development. Like now, at least she might not have been ready to say that she was totally in love and ready to spend the rest of her life with her, but there was no longer shame around admitting that she was having these kind of internal discussion with herself, where earlier on, she didn't even want to admit it. So I really like how I'm starting to see some more character development being shown instead of just kind of told.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of conversation where, like, I think it ended with something along the lines of like the guy's like calling her out on it or something, and she's like, well, yeah, religion doesn't want me to do stuff, and mom doesn't want me to do stuff, other people don't want me to do stuff, but what about what I want? Yeah, that's part of it. Her seeing,
I just need to quit pleasing everybody else or thinking I have to please everybody else. And for once in my life, what do I really want? And then that plays out over the next couple of issues. I mean, she gets to the point where Kachu's pushing her a little bit and saying, hey, what if I just buy a house and we live in Houston together and blah, blah, blah. And Kachu gets all mad, like, well, you don't love me. And Francine is just like, I need to figure out what I want. I need some space for myself. I want to be with you right now, but I still need to figure out what I want. And so again, that's this character development that Morris moving her through, I think is really expertly done.
And I think, both with her possibly being in love with Kachu, as well as her sort of desire to please other people more, even at the cost of herself, it's something that we as readers, I think, have seen for a while, and that's why I think even that scene that you mentioned before and that we were talking about is with her portraits. And she's like, your drawing shows me things that I don't recognize about that's in a way, that's the comic storytelling thing that Terry Moore is doing, is that his drawings, are literally showing us things, us the readers, things that the characters don't necessarily recognize themselves. They don't know this about themselves, but we know this about them, because so there's this kind of almost meta narrative of this of the role of art in the role, one of the many roles that art has, and it's that mirroring of things that may not even be evident to the people who are being mirrored, but it's that act of putting it down on paper in this simplified drawing in this art form that does that. It just sort of struck me that this is something that we know when we get to these moments, and when she says we kind of feel this, not in a you go girl type of way, but we feel like it's been a while coming and it's been brewing for a while, and we've seen this from the beginning, and the fact that she's acknowledging it is gratifying to us. Yeah. So I mean, I just like the fact that Terry Moore is sort of commenting on that, even with those, the portrait and the art part of it, to say, that those exact words that you were quoting of where you see things or you show me things about myself that I don't know myself, seems to be the way that I feel about this comic, and us as readers being manipulated or engineered by the author.
That's a great observation. I just wanted to say that's a great observation. I didn't pick up that, but I think you're right. So thanks for sharing. That's why I love these discussions. Get these.
He does manipulate us quite well, because the next chapter, what is it called, Tropics of Desire, where you have these potential realities that could happen. So for the reader, are they going to be together or not? And then what does he do? He has these different realities that could occur. That's when Francine is throwing up in the bathroom, and she's about to tell her mom and Brad what she should tell them. That I'm in love with Francine, that I want to put off the marriage, and then there's all these marriage where you have one version where he does tell them. You have another version where Francine and Kachu grow old together, and there's a daughter, Ashley, who's writing a book about their life.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then you have another reality where she marries Brad, loses touch with Kachu until she learns that when they're both old, when she's old, she gets a phone call that Kachu is dead.
Can I stop you for 1 second? Just say, I actually had tears in my eyes at that part. Even though I knew it was going the second time through, I still, I was standing there and I was mopey about it. And I was like, wow, that's how much these characters affect me. Sorry, Gore. Didn't mean to cut in, but that really hit home.
That was my point. But it's a very emotional issue.
Yeah.
As many of these are. Also his drawing. He's so good at the drawings. That's just it. It's the writing and the drawing. He's like, he mentioned Jaime Hernandez. It's like Jaime Hernandez and Loving Rockets. They're just so good at this. You can just look at those pictures, not even read the words, and you see the grief of an elderly Francine holding the phone in tears. You're going, that is pain. That is anguish. And then you read the text.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
And to envision them and to put it on paper where they're how many decades older from where the story originally is, you can still recognize them, and yet they've got all the aging sign as well, which I thought was just so expertly done.
Yeah, so for me, it kind of was like two slightly separate areas. You had the area where you had Francine's possible futures about whether she got married, whether she went to Cthulhu, whether she stayed single, what kind of plan of that kind of happened. And I found it quite interesting that when she actually finally did make a choice of which way she was going to go with things, it just ended with her telling her mum and fiance that she was pregnant. She didn't actually play out the scene of them kind of breaking up, which was quite interesting. But the other one, when we've got the daughter story, I took that as actually being the real future rather than like a possible future, because what I thought was really interesting about that arc was it was very fourth wall breaking from Terry perspective. There was a lot of moments in it where they were like, okay, I know this book's getting repetitive. I know there's things that might be boring you. I know there's things that might, be getting to a point where you're going to stop reading. But this is the point where you shouldn't stop reading because things are going to change going forward. and they're mentioning all these like little things in there as it's kind of going through. And there's even parts where it's like, one of the two, I think it's Cthulhu, calls out the daughter for like one of the things not being accurate or something, and then Francine says something like, "Oh, I love all the stuff that you added in about like the Parker girls or whatever else," which again insinuates that all could be made up by the daughter, which makes it a really interesting kind of concept because it allows you to forgive some of the flaws in the story up until now, because things might not be 100% accurate if they're being told by a character. And the other thing is it allows us to be a little bit more open to the random craziness, because we're not going, oh, this did happen in a random one person's life in the real world. This is something that might have been exaggerated a little bit for the story. And I think that's quite fun as an overall kind of thing. But yeah, there's a whole I made a whole bunch of notes about that kind of side of things. There's a few other things going on in the background at the same time. Cthulhu's staying with David at this point.
Let's hold on one second, Hanji. I just want to mention that one of the things I like, because we're on that section, we're talking about the possible futures, right? And so I one of the things I liked what Moore does is he's looking at the choices we either make, how things could have been different, but also maybe our regrets about the choices we didn't make. And I love the fact that he's using this idea of the unreliable narrator, right? We don't know if the narrator is reliable. And as I started to think about like how Terry Moore is telling this story, so we've got our normal comics, we get photos, we get photo evidence, like here's Cthulhu's Ferrari in one of the upcoming issues, right? So we get photos, we get lyrics with actual music and guitar tablature, right? We get prose worked in there. And now we get this unreliable narrator. And Terry Moore is using like all these different kind of techniques and formats to tell this story. And I like how he just plays with them and he tries to seamlessly work with them. And I just respect his artistic ability to kind of take different approaches instead of going, well, this is what's working, I'm just going to stick with my guns. But doing things way differently. And one of them is this idea of the unreliable narrator, which was pretty big in the SF community in the 60s and 70s as new wave science fiction came on. But Moore just does a really interesting way of weaving all these different techniques to tell the story.
Yeah. And while we've got all this going on, which is big enough as it is on Francine's side, we've also got David and Cthulhu staying together, but not actually together. And I can't remember if it's now or briefly before now, but there is one point in time where Cthulhu sleeps with David, and David's then expecting the relationship to formalize a little bit more. Maybe they start sleeping in the same bed, even if they're not sleeping together, something like that. And Cthulhu's extremely reluctant to let it move a single inch. And I find those conversations quite interesting because from her perspective, she's like, I've never kind of led you on. But from his perspective, there have been moves in the relationship that have just never actually become moves. So he has been led on in a way, even if it was unintentional. And there's there's this interesting kind of, are they a friendship? Are they a kind of couple dynamic? And we have various other characters visiting them during this period. We have Tambi and I think Cassie and a few others. Casey, visiting them during this period, and we get their commentary on this sort of relationship as well, which only causes it to build and build to the point where we get another Kachu explosion, but this time a little bit more kind of for real. And David decides that, as far as we're concerned at this point, that he's had enough. We don't know what his plans are going forward. We just see him kind of walk away from things and be like, okay.
And there's another wrinkle in there, right? We got we find out that Casey and Freddie are divorced now at this point.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Casey also has this like, Kachu, if you don't get on David, he's all mine. Like, I don't think David has any interest in her, but she has a lot of interest in him. And then she meets Joel, this guy in the plane. So Casey's got this, I hate the stereotype, but it feels like she's got that little clingy, like I just kind of got to find somebody to be with. But like I said, I don't want to let her get lost. Her and Freddie still have a little role to play in the story. So just keeping Casey up to date as to where they're at.
Yeah. And if Freddie as well is also, gets to this mentality where you almost believe that he wants to actually change at this point, and that he wants to do something like he is who he is, and we know that's who he is. But we do know that he genuinely, on some level, does care for Francine, and that he at least would like to try, if it's possible, to improve himself, even though it's not really going to happen.
Yet. With Freddie, and this the next chapter, next story arc is Brave New World, and we see when he's him and his partner, the other lawyer they're interviewing, a girl named Lindsay.
Oh yeah.
About what happened to her when she was very young. So at this point, Francine is pregnant, but she decides to leave Brad. She comes back to Houston. Like you alluded to, David has had it with Kachu, and he just leaves. And so Kachu's left alone. But she decides to come back to Houston. And so now Kachu is in Houston. She reunites with Francine. They're getting along. David's out of the picture for now. And Francine decides to see a therapist to deal with her issues, right? And back to Freddie, Freddie has a new client, this girl named Lindsay, who was, almost killed by this when she was younger. And so you see a side of Freddie, hey, he's doing something good here. But again, there's something else going on here with Lindsay, and it's not everything as it seems. And then David, we find out, has left to go to Japan. And Tambi, for some reason, is tracking him. So, and that's where we are here with these people here. But basically, Francine is now warming up to the idea of being with Kachu. Yeah. She really is. So it looks good. Like looks like they might end up together, but it doesn't work out that way.
That's one of my favorite scenes. Is that little snippet when Francine's going to the psychiatrist. And she walks into the door, and it's Francine at like 7 years old or whatever.
Yeah,
and he plays that out. We're like, wait a second, you like a girl? You and there's this, like her what would her younger self say to her where she's at now? I thought that, and then there's the scene, they're back in Houston together, as you mentioned, with Francine and Kachu, and they go into the art store, the art supply store, and it was so funny because. The clerk, the 16-year-old clerk, whoever is there, that's helping Francine, calls her ma'am, and Francine gets all upset over that, and just about like, I'm not a ma'am, I'm still young, and da 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 da. And then she's trying to drop hints to get the girl to recognize, like, oh well, Griffin Silver, then, don't you? And it just reminded me of, like, I have an older brother, and I remember when my older brother, when I would bring up a band that was current and modern, and he was like still listening to Billy Joel at the time. It was like, it was past him. And I'm like, oh man, that just hit home. Like at some point in my life when I recognized, like, I'm no longer really keeping up with current music. I am out of touch. I am actually older. And Francine's starting to get that feeling at 29 or whatever, as she's in conversation with that 16, 17-year-old clerk. I thought that was a really cool scene.
Yeah. At that point, I think things start kind of tying back in together a little bit. So like you mentioned earlier that there was the case that Freddie was kind of doing, and that tied to the therapist that Francine was kind of seeing. There was also one of the girls that's their like friend who works at the gym. I forget what her name is. Like she was on covering a late shift, and then this guy who'd attacked the therapist also tried it on with her at the gym, but she's a black belt and ended up kicking his ass. So we've got this kind of the characters are starting to kind of like tie back in for other reasons. It's interesting to see Freddie tying into the story, connecting not through chasing Francine, like it's through something that is his kind of career side of stuff. So we get a bit more of kind of stuff around that, and then as you said, Tambi's kind of chasing David in Japan. David's gone straight to kind of Tokyo, and she's gone kind of more central Japan, and then kind of searched for him as the book kind of leads it, and they have a bit of a confrontation where she's like, well, you've messed up, like how can you leave? Like I need somebody to be the heir to our family, and you're the only man that could choose to let even touch her, so we kind of need you to kind of do this. And David, as he said to all the sort of strong women that try and get him to do something against Kachu, he's like, just leave her alone, kind of thing, like just let her do her kind of thing. And they end up, we're not 100% sure if they've agreed at the end of this little kind of arc, but they end up kind of basically discussing the premise of him impregnating Tammy instead, because she can have a kid, and then it doesn't have to involve Kachu.
Yeah, and you see his love for Kachu at that point, even more. I mean, just this idea of like, I'll do whatever you want. Just let Kachu live her life. Like you can feel that, like she's been through enough. Let her find her happiness. And David basically comes out and tells Tambi that.
Because he didn't hold anything against her. Like he left a letter for Kachu that literally just said, like, enjoy your life. I'm not meant to be in it, kind of thing.
Yeah. I just want to check in for the love of comics. Did you get that far? Were you?
Yes.
Are you okay? Just want to make sure, because since you didn't do the homework, and you'll be penalized for that later.
Well. I think that's just about where I have been able to get to. So perfect. I was just, I was hoping to like maybe you can just scoot a little couple of pages further along while you guys are discussing this bit. I'm not gonna do it justice, but I have read this far. I think. I was trying to figure out what the total number of pages is, but I think David's departure and maybe again, I don't know what an issue is, but it's right about there where I've gotten to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last or second last page of where we stopped was, without giving any absolute specifics, is when Brad turns back up in some form.
Yeah, so that's wonderful how that's done.
That's where we kind of stop.
It's this issue here.
Oh, that's that issue?
That's that issue.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And it begins with, at the bottom, it says, "You'll remember me," at the bottom of the comic. And the next scene that we have is Lindsay identifying the man who had assaulted her when she was young. And it continues. And then we see Tambi and David after they've engaged in a lot of sex too. And then we have that Fields of Gold.
I mean, it looks like she's been beating him up more than having sex.
Yeah, very violent, very violent. And so,
which I actually thought was quite interesting, actually, because going back just a little bit, there was a bit where Veronica sends somebody to attack David to just kind of challenge him.
Oh yes,
and he absolutely floors them
He kills it. Is that the one in New York when he kills the person?
Yeah. The guy comes at him and just like almost like a knee-jerk reaction, he just takes this guy out. And then she says, "Oh, you never knew how to like, you know, go to different gears, did you?" Or something along those lines. Like, "Oh, you know, like is you defend to kill," you know? And something with that stuck back in my head a little bit, that I was expecting even just the littlest bit of like fight back between like him and Tambi, but then that shows that he's like conceded, you know. He's not actually fighting back because as we've kind of mentioned already, he's doing this for Kachu. Whereas if he thought that he was being attacked in any way, it would be a different story.
But that was something I forgot to point out, I guess, discussing regarding David is, how is he able to do that? He kills that guy in a very professional way. So now you're thinking, like Kachu, David, who are you? How can you do that?
Yeah, and we know he ran some sort of gang in his teens, but we don't really know anything about it at this point.
Right. And so we, again, see the similarities with him and Kachu, almost like parallel lines here, almost it seems here. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that because it reminded me of that regarding David, how he's, and again, that's why I said, I think 4 or 5 issues after this, we get that story about David, which again, Terry Moore has taken out of the Omnis and put it at the end. And we get insight as to why David can do what he did. Yeah. We learn why.
The only other bit I guess I really want to kind of mention in the arc that we kind of read is the Kachu falling scene, which kind of goes between multiple sections. So it just kind of starts out of nowhere to begin with. She's just kind of falling. And then you see her seeing someone in the distance. We're not sure if it's Emma or Francine, but she's kind of like, falling past somebody on a kind of hillside. And this goes on a few times. And we don't really kind of see much more of it. And then when it comes back to it to flesh out a little bit, she basically commits Hanakari. Like she stabs her own chest, cuts out her heart, and then throws it at sort of like Francine. And then it turns into a dove. Francine catches it and throws it back. And then she continues falling. And then at that point, we're talking to, and I'm going to blank her name, Cherry something.
Cherry Hunter? Hammer.
Cherry Hammer, yeah. So then she's talking to Cherry Hammer, and she's like, "Oh, so that's what it feels like." And this whole scene has just been like, like how she feels that she's taken her heart out and given it to someone, and then it's kind of been like pushed back at her, and it's kind of this big kind of metaphor, I guess, of her kind of story. But what's even more interesting is we then find that Cherry is working for Tambi as a headhunter of the Parker girls that have gone rogue, that are like deep undercover rogues. And potentially somebody has been around for the last year or so in Kachu's life who is a Parker girl that she's not aware of. And that's where we're left a little bit in limbo, where we don't know if that's one of the gym girls, if that's the therapist, if that's some random stranger in their life, if it's Casey. Like, we don't know who the person is. We just know there's been somebody in their lives that this girl has to look out for.
Yeah, and at the same time, we've got Detective Walsh is back involved.
He's doing his investigations.
The FBI is back on trying to figure out. So again, we're circling back around with some of these characters that kind of showed up pages and pages ago, and Detective Walsh is now back in the mix as well.
Well, that's where we get the evidence shots. So as you mentioned earlier, you get the evidence pictures, and then we get quite a chunk of prose sections where we get his kind of scene kind of conversations, as almost an info dump, but it keeps you up to date with what he's doing in the background kind of thing, and then ties what his case is into Freddie's case, into the therapist, and everything starts kind of coming back together again.
Yeah, what you have at when Kachu is talking to Cherry, and she learns that there's someone else, there's a rogue Parker girl somewhere in her life, is at the same time Francine's at home. She's come to terms with the fact this is it. I'm going to basically, I don't know, consummate with Kachu, because she has this nice dinner. Hoping when Kachu comes home, right?
Sexy dress.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That reminded me of when with Freddie. You know, when
Mhm.
Freddie at the beginning of issue 1 of our story here is when she finally decides to have sex with Freddie, and she goes through all this elaborate preparation. Goes to see Freddie at his office, opens the door, and he's having sex with another girl. Now here she's preparing this wonderful dinner for Kachu. Kachu's at the bar, but she's a little bit horny, and so she comes home. Yeah, because she goes to see Casey. Now Casey at this point has revealed that she's interested in Kachu, and so she ends up spending the night with Casey. They engage in sex. So Francine's at home. Kachu never comes home. Okay, fine. So she goes to see Casey. And when she goes to see Casey, she walks in and she looks at Kachu and she notices that Kachu's not wearing any pants. And she puts 2 and 2 together. And that was basically what happened to her with Freddie.
Yeah.
And, and it's devastating. That's why Kachu's reaction is so severe. And Casey's like, what's the big deal, so to speak, is you don't understand. Sex for Francine is something very special. And this is devastating, absolutely devastating for her. What I wrote here, I think those are my notes for that. Is yes, and we already have that song in our back of our mind. The Fields of Gold song. You remember me. So this is a devastating story. At this point, for Francine and for Francine and for Kachu. And that's how the story ends. Yeah, it's how it ends with. Oh yes, and she runs out, and when she's wandering around, she runs into Brad and Brad's brother.
Yeah, that's where we end.
Because he's come back looking for her.
Yeah,
he's come back looking for her, and she's going to go with him.
Mm-hmm.
So Kachu messed up terribly.
See, I didn't take it as Kachu actually slept with Casey. Like the way that I took it, just because the wording that she says, and I could be wrong, but she said something along the lines of, "I just need someone to hold me." And Kachu's been in those kind of moments where when she says that, that's what she means. Like she doesn't mean any more than that. And she's also quite a truthful person. And when Francine came in, she outright denied that they had sex. So at this point in the story, in my head anyway, I can't remember exactly what happens next or if it's clarified going forward. But my understanding was that she just wanted comfort and slept in the same bed with Casey. And then it was perceived that she broke that trust in the same way that Freddie did, but she hadn't. But I could be wrong.
I mean, that's what I thought in the moment as well, because obviously we cut away and come back over here, and it's this whole sort of understanding and the vehemence. But then just a couple of pages later, I think she says, she's not like you. And she says, what does that mean when Casey and Kachu are having after Francine has stormed out? And she said, for her, sex is this huge spiritual everything. You don't know what I've been through with her. And now I've thrown it all away for a one-night stand with a horny cheerleader. And that's what she says to Casey. And then Casey is like, you must be in real pain to say something like that to me, etc. Yeah. So it was that line where she says, I've thrown it away for a one-night stand, which made me...
That does make sense. And Casey did have the previous conversation with Francine where she admitted that she'd had a couple of lesbian encounters in the past. So Francine's also got that going on in her head.
But I think even if she didn't sleep with her, you touched on it. It's the intimacy.
Yeah, totally.
Right? It's like when people have affairs, right? And you have an affair, and it didn't mean anything. Okay, and sometimes people will forgive that one night stand, but they won't forgive. But the fact that you don't have sex with somebody, but you're spending all this time with this other woman, your guy, and you're sharing all this personal information with them that you don't share with your partner. Now that's a bigger breach of trust for many people than having just sex somewhere for like 30 minutes. Yeah, so I think Alan, I think that's the key here. The intimacy there is you're supposed to do this with Francine, not with Casey.
I think it's also the person. Like, had that been a second one night stand with David, I don't think it would have been quite the same reaction. I think it's because it is a person that she doesn't know as well. It's a lesbian encounter. It's all these things that Francine hasn't been able to, allow herself to do. And then, as you've kind of summed up already, Kachu kind of threw it away on a dime, which, yes, I mean, it makes Francine feel a bit kind of cheap, but it also makes her kind of judge herself more again as to like what she has to give in order for somebody to treat her as an equal.
Yeah. Brad came looking for her. He traveled all the way. He came back for her, and she goes with him.
And he's got the silver band with him as well. There's like 3 of them.
Yeah.
Like
his rock star brother.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, Felix, since this was your first time reading through, and now you are close to 2/3 of the way through. What are your initial thoughts, or I shouldn't even say initial. What are your thoughts now that you're, 60% of the way in, 65% of the way in?
Yeah, I think it's just an amplification of what I said before. I think continuing it right now feels more settled in some ways, where I feel that, and this is something I've felt about a number of things in the past. Like the example I always give is of Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where I think the subsequent books might be even better than the first book in some ways, but they don't make me laugh out loud necessarily, because the first book was such a revelation in its style and its voice and its nonsense and all of that stuff. And then you get into the world, the science fiction and the plotting and the characters get more complex and more, it becomes a bigger achievement, but you settle into it and you go with it in a much more, and I think that's kind of the way it is, that maybe the earlier pages will seem to me to be less sophisticated, but now that I'm in the world and I'm going along with it. So it's a curious mixture of me continuing to be impressed and thinking this is, in my personal experience, one of the most wonderful comics reading experiences I've had. But at the same time, it's not necessarily as mind-blowingly revelatory as it was when I first started it, and I had no idea what I was in for. And now it's more like I know what I'm in for, so I'm interested and intrigued to see where it goes next, but I'm sort of primed for it, and I'm ready for all kinds of outlandish things to happen. And whenever they happen, I trust the author more that they're going to weave it back together, or it's a curious sort of thing where I think it's getting more sophisticated. I think it's getting more complex, but at the same time, I'm more comfortably into it rather than, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever, which I do think it is. It is a fantastic comic. I think it's an incredible achievement. And unless the wheels completely come off, I don't see it. I don't see my opinion on that changing. I'm really putting it up there as one of those long form achievements in comics, like Love and Rockets, like Stray Bullets, which this reminded me a lot of. Of course, not at all in the. I mean, of course, there are crime things, but it's that density and that approach to character arcs and weaving them back and forth. But at the same time, it's very unique because it's focused on 2 or 3 characters centrally, and then you've got all these other characters coming in. So the short of it is, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's amazing. And it's getting back to that thought that I expressed in our last live stream, that I can't believe it's taken me this long to read this, as a gray-haired person who's been reading comics for so many years. I would have thought that now I feel foolish for not having gotten to this faster. But then again, I think it's because things were out of print and they were hard to get, all the trades, etc. The omnibus slipcase had to come back in. And of course, now that I did it, now Dark Horse decides to reprint everything. But I'm very excited about the fact that there might be an entire generation or two of people who will now discover this work thanks to Dark Horse's reprints.
I don't think Dark Horse are doing a slipcase, though. I think they're just doing like one omnibus and then a second omnibus, like you do traditionally, kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do trades, but they might do like deluxe hardcovers or something. Like maybe they'll put 2 trades together in one. I'm not sure
maybe.
how they would approach it.
Terry's already done those in abstract anyway, where there's the hardcovers that are like roughly an arc long. Because like a lot of his newer books he's done are that rough size. They're they're somewhere around like 5 to 10 issue kind of like arcs.
Yeah.
So he's used that same
probably not in print. I think Dark Horse would do a sort of rejuvenation of.
I think they were a fairly recent thing, though. That's what I'm saying. There was trades, and then there was the thicker trades that Blackpool's got. That are like the 4 chunky trades. But I want to say it was within the last, give or take, let's say like 5 years that the smaller hardcovers were done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they can still do it. I mean, Fantagraphics is doing Corto Maltese again, and IDW did them, like maybe
it'd be nice, I think, for those who just want like a specific, their favorite arc type thing, if they don't want to have the entire thing, or there's like, certain things that
blasphemy.
But honestly, I also think that Dark Horse, and I know this.
Not everyone's going to read several hundred pages every time, right?
I will find them and send Tambi to their house if they do not.
No, but I also honestly think that a lot of this has to do, just like with Usagi Yojimbo, etc. A lot of this has to do with international distribution as well. Dark Horse through Penguin Random House goes a lot of places where Abstract Studios, etc. won't.
Yeah.
So even though there have been things that people in the UK and the US have had availability of, I think they might do the whole set again just because they'll be shipping it out with a larger print run across the world through Penguin Random House.
Yeah, I've only ever been able to get abstract books from Forbidden Planet in the UK, and it's usually just within that first roughly month when they come into print. Because otherwise, like, they're just not available, and the markup is crazy. Like, you could be paying twice the price that you would get it in America.
Well, now I can comment a little bit more informedly about print runs and issues that small publishers have to face keeping things alive. But yes, I think it's phenomenal, and I might end up double dipping at some point of time because the first volume of this slipcase has completely come off its bindings, as I was showing you guys last time, which is good. But it's a great story, but I might, look at that. This is it's completely off, it's just like the entire block is.
Yeah.
Mine started. You could just reglue that.
Yeah, I can. I know. But then I'd be worried about opening it and reading it. I like.
Don't tell them that. Make them buy more copies.
If it was the hard spine where it's got like the end pages and stuff that you need to kind of get into to glue it, it's a lot harder. But when it's like that, you just need a little bit of bookbinding and glue.
I'm not the biggest omnibus fan myself. I like.
It is a chunky boy.
Yeah, and I like trades. I like slim hardcovers. Those are my favorite formats, etc. So sometimes I'll even seek out older editions just so because I'd rather have 6 slim hardcovers than 2 giant omnibuses or something like that.
More blasphemy.
2 seconds.
I just Blackpoll, you are one of the few people I know who buys omnibuses and then reads them. Most people buy omnibuses and have them on their shelves.
The couple of things I really like about the omnibus format is, I try to limit the number of pages. I've got a couple of the green arrows from Mike Corral, which are like 1,500 pages, which are just unwieldy. But one, when you get the omnibuses versus a bunch of hardcovers, it takes up less space on your shelves. And the omnibuses are always oversized, which I really like, versus the standard size hardcovers.
Well, the more hardcovers, the hardcovers themselves take up more space.
Okay. Exactly.
So here is a perfect example right over here. Is that here is everything Granville by Brian Talbot, and these are the Jonathan Cape editions. But you've got Dark Horse doing the same thing, and my thing always ends up is, well, I don't need to choose if I can just get both, right? And so I can just have it over here. But yes, you're absolutely right. When I look at it, the space taken by that omnibus on a shelf of all of these, and these taken with their covers, there's definitely a difference over there. So that shows it. But it also here I have the other counter is that this particular omnibus is shorter than the original albums, at least the Jonathan Cape editions. So in this case, the omnibus is a trade-off where the trades, so to speak, were taller, and this one is shorter. But again, this one was on discount, but I honestly, whenever I go to read Granville, in spite of this being a lovely edition, I'm probably going to go to one of these books because that's what it allows me to pick out that one story that I want to, and I don't have to pick out that whole thing if I want to read a particular thing, and that's kind of the same way I would feel about a lot of things like Beasts of Burden or Black Sad, etc. Sure. The ones where they're not necessarily serial the way that Strangers in Paradise is, but if they are standalone stories, again, that individual trade of Usagi, I'm probably picking up more than the omnibus, Fantagraphics box set sort of thing. But that's just me as far as the ease of reading, but the identity of it being an individual piece, and that's why I'm very fascinated by not just the single issues, but the trades of Strangers in Paradise. I wonder if reading them in trades would chapterize them differently in my brain than the kind of long continuum of a story that I currently imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just want to show this. This is the Strangers in Paradise 25, and this is the size of the hardcover.
Nice.
And
I like
so
that.
This is the format that they tried to do like chunks of Strangers in Paradise in. I said fairly recently in these sort of smaller books, because you can get like this Motor Girl. There's a Serial, which is the spin-off of Zoe's character out of Rachel Rising, and there's a few other kind of stories that were done in this format first. And I really like this because I think it's roughly like maybe 5 to 10 issues in each of these, and they're just nice little, kind of books, and they're all like sewn binding and stuff, so they stretch out fine. Everything you can get. Okay.
I think 5 to 6 issues in a sewn binding hardcover. I love it. I love that idea. I think sometimes when I think about the Hellboy library editions, that's like my perfect. Like, it's got a nice heft to it. It's large, and it's great for that art, etc. But it's also manageable enough where you can hold it in one hand and turn the pages while sitting on the couch.
I quite like that about the new Ghost Machine books that have been coming out from Jeff Johns. Like, they've been roughly 5 issues, but they're like library sized, but they're only 5 issues wide. So it's nice. You get really nice art, but it's not a hefty book that you have to kind of carry around. So it's quite nice.
Well, Gore, how do you collect your Saga run? Those singles issues, or did you like double and triple dip with that one?
I was
no trigger warning.
Has all the variant covers.
No, I stopped buying at issue 60.
Saga has no variant covers.
Again, the only reason I read it, a friend of mine, because for years people had told me to read it, and I should like it. I like love stories. It's science fiction. It's got good artwork, and so I should like the story. And so after I got a huge bundle, like for $1 each copy, and I sat and read it, and I intensely disliked it. And so a friend of mine, when I told her this, she was in shock, because I was the only person in her life that she knew, even online, who disliked it. But now I continue to read it, and just to needle her and other people who liked it. So I continue to buy it in singles. Eventually, I sold them off.
So he does buy it.
But speaking of this is Locas. You probably already know.
Oh, wonderful!
Fantagraphics finally reprinted Locas.
Yeah.
And this is the Maggie and Hopi stories. Now they did this 10, 15 years ago. A big monster just like this. Although the original one actually seems a little bit heavier, and it's 700 pages. And it sells for $50, but I got it at cost at my shop for $30. And
that's a deal. I mean,
yeah,
even $50 I think is a deal in this day and age.
It is.
And let me mention this too with Fantagraphics right now. I think until tomorrow, I think they're running a deal on their website where if you buy from their website, you spend $50, you get a $50 credit.
Yeah, the Fantabucks.
Yep. So I think it ends tomorrow. So if people are interested and they want to go out and pick that up, you could get it for the $50 and then get a $50 credit on top of it for your next order from them. That's a really good deal.
Nice.
So I just wanted to ask about the Locust volume you have, because I have mine over there, but mine's the older one, Gore. Is this like that looks substantially bigger than mine, but I have Locust and Locust 2. And Locust is only from the first 50, and Locust 2 is from the next 20. Volume 2 is...
it's chunkier.
Let me go get that as well.
It's chunkier and...
That's funny. I've got them all.
This is it, right? This is the one you have?
I've got all the small ones. No, you were talking about who's got the bigger and the easier, like book trays. No, I've got all the paperback ones. That's funny.
There's Locust here.
That looks much. See, look at this. This is Locust.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
So what is that? Extras?
Yeah. It's a little bit. It's a little bit taller. This one's a little bit more. I haven't looked to see what other differences they have, but maybe this one's a little bit wider, maybe a little bit, I suppose. Not wider, but it opens up a little bit. There's more to it, I suppose. This one opens better, that's for sure. This one, it's glued binding. It doesn't open as well.
The new one's glued binding?
This one, yeah, it looks like it's glued, isn't it? Oh, it has this, but when I don't see any. I don't see the.
No, I think that'll be sewn and glued on top of the
sewn
sewing,
and glued.
probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes the glue just spills a little bit. I done a video a few years back now, where I talked about basically just taking like a letter opener and running it down a little bit under the little ribbon between the hardcover edge and the ribbon, just to see if there's like anything kind of like lightly they're holding. If you hit like a hard block, then like stop. Obviously, just leave it if it's hard glued. But if it's just like a little bit of glue there, sometimes you can just free it up and then it'll actually lift like any other omnibus. It's just that they put too much glue on it.
Well, I would recommend this Locust one. It's again, it is a deal for $50, and Amazon has it cheaper. And again, your comic shop probably has it cheaper if you get a discount there. But it's a really good deal because even at $50, and it's I'm surprised it's only $50.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that it's $50. I would have thought that by this time it would be like a $99 thing that you wait until it falls till $75 somewhere, etc. For the heft, especially in that comparison over there. But anyway, I thought I would skip that double dip.
Paradise, if you guys have read, but if you guys have read anything else by Terry Moore, presuming that you have, is Strangers in Paradise your favorite read of his stuff, or is there anything else that kind of stands out to you?
Let's see. I read Strangers.
I mean, I haven't read anything else, so for me, the answer is just automatically yes.
I read Rachel, Motor Girl, Serial. Those are the ones I read by him. Yeah, easily. This is my favorite of the aforementioned books. It's remarkable.
Yeah. For me, you know me. This is one of my, like I said, this is one of my top 2 favorite reads. I can't really decide on a favorite, but the characters in here. I know, Thailand, you and I are friends on Goodreads, and I saw one of your comments on the trades. Like, I just want to get back to the espionage stuff. I'm completely Yeah. No, and it's not a critique, but I was like, I laughed at it because I'm like, I don't really. They could take all that out. I wouldn't mind because it's the emotional, the relationships that I connect it with for whatever reason. So this is one of my favorite stories. Yeah,
I think it's funny because it depends on like what mood I'm in, what I'm reading at the time, that kind of stuff. But like the first time round, I think I was not knowing or not expecting, what was kind of coming in. Very similar to kind of what Angshan's been seeing so far, where from that reason I was following the sort of slice of life story, and it was kind of being interrupted with this espionage stuff. Whereas for me this time round, having read the Strangers in Paradise 25 and various other kind of like things down the line, that kind of like Parker Girls is another standalone book. I know so much more about the Parker Girls and that kind of stuff in that universe now that it's quite a fundamental aspect for me. So when I get into those parts of the story and I maybe didn't remember them as well, or didn't get into them as heavily the first time round, I'm like, oh, like I say, when I kind of like picked up this time, I'm like, Tambi and Bambi are two different people. Like how did I forget that? Like how these like little things of kind of tied together. They could very much, like, it's really interesting that you could have wrote the slice of life story as one book, and you could have wrote the spy story as another book, but he didn't. He wrote it as one, overall kind of story. Something that I also, forget a lot in this is so many Japanese references through things, because David and Darcy are a Japanese family, like tied to all that kind of side of things. So when you've got that reference of like Kachu cutting her heart out, doing it in the style of like Hanakari and stuff, it's like that's a reference to Japan. Like it's a reference to David. It's a reference to all these other kind of things that you might not be picking up on the first time round, because he very much looks like a standard white guy, just in the way they've drawn him, But there is this other culture kind of going on, which is really interesting to me. So yeah, I find it really like a different experience each time. And for me, Strangers in Paradise it's a bit of a weird one where I can really appreciate the book as the length of story, the development over time, the attention, being able to keep you kind of going through that kind of side of things. Experimentation going on through this with we've kind of discussed everything from music to photographs to all sorts of different things kind of thrown in throughout. But having said that, and having read almost everything else that he's written, I personally prefer the slightly more concise things that he's done down the line that he's learnt through Strangers in Paradise. So while I can 100% appreciate what Strangers in Paradise is, for me, Rachel Rising is an easier read, for instance. And while I love Kachu as a character, Zoe, the little serial killer, is like my favorite character in all of like his stuff. And I would say to anybody who doesn't have the time to delve into something big, Motor Girl is an absolute like emotional ride for anybody who just wants a really short delve into time or stuff without having to know the rest of the universe or anything else. You can just read that and get a taste of his style in a slightly more concise way, both format and length, than you would get in Strangers. But putting all that aside, I love that you guys enjoy it as much as you do, and that I've been pushed to reread it, because it's taken me back to the origins of this universe and making me go back through all this stuff, where if it was my personal choice, I'd be skipping so much of the prose and things in these things. But I'm taking the time to kind of go through it. So it's enjoyable, but it's going to be that slight love-hate in the way that I like to read. It's just one of those things.
No, I like the ebb and flow. Like a lot of comics mentioned Archie comics. You go from an Archie comic story or pages, then you get into Modesty Blaze territory. He fluctuates there so well. Jaime Hernandez does that so well also with Love and Rockets. You have a fun penny century story, and then you have Flies in the Ceiling story. The story of Izzy and her breakdown. One of the most moving stories I've ever read in the comic. And it's just that fluctuation. And got me thinking, I was writing some of these things down, is either the masterpieces or maybe minor masterpieces. That's a thing of comics in black and white. Saga Yojimbo, Love and Rockets, Cerebus, Concrete, The Airtonaut. I think Modesty Blaze, the comic strip, was originally in black and white. Stray Bullets. I think Corto Martes, originally was in black and white, I think. But these are like, and also these are done either by one creator or maybe as a team. Because I think Stray Bullets is a team, right? It's a husband and wife team, I think. Cerebus,
no.
Is it just David Lapham?
Yeah, it's just David Lapham. I think there might be some editorial or publishing stuff. But it's all written and drawn, lettered by David Lapham. Yeah.
And Cerebus is done with Dave Sim and Gerhard. And so, but it's interesting, how these black and white comics are just so, I think in least some of the North American comics are just masterpieces in the medium. And they're done basically by a single person or a team or two people and such. But they're just remarkable, and they happen to be in black and white. And yet, on a separate note, so many people who we like independent comics just won't read a black and white comic, or they won't watch a black and white film. They just cannot. It doesn't hold their attention, no matter how good it is. And there's nothing you can do to change their minds.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I also think that there's a bit of almost a manga element to this, where like a lot of manga creators are that one person being the artist, the writer, trying to do the story. There's a lot less manga that ends up being an epic that you want to kind of come back to, in the way that the stories that you've mentioned are. A lot of mangas more kind of throwaway airport reading type stuff. But there are a few, like for instance, for me, like Vagabond would be right up there with, some of these black and white comics where one person has, poured their heart into these books, almost to the point of mental illness to get the book done.
Well, on that cheerful note, I think we are now geared for our final episode, which will take place next month, Highland G?
Ideally, yeah. So about a month from now, we'll pick up.
Try to get the end of April.
All right, and that will be ending with a bang, and hopefully we'll have Damien back for the grand finale.
Yeah, I almost wanted to threaten him with a plane crash, but then I didn't want to jinx it and have it come to life just because of what we were reading. I'm like, that probably wouldn't be a good idea. Yeah.
Oh,
we hope Damien can join us again, though. We miss his honesty and his
he's got a homework assignment of 2-hour video to catch up on with this one. Because we'll start the next episode by quizzing him on this episode to make sure that he's caught everything.
He's got to do the recap.
Right.
But no,
we have a weekly Dungeons and Dragons game, and then if I want to be mean to someone, I ask them to recap, because then they get to put on display how little attention they were paying in the
That was something that you mentioned just quickly, though, on the flight kind of stuff. It reminded me of in the story. I thought it was interesting that neither Kachu or David really seemed flustered about going back on flights after their experience. Other people seemed kind of worried about it, and I think at one point, like, Francine says to one of them, like, "Oh, tell me you won't go on a flight again," or something, and then like 10 minutes later, Kachu's like, "I'm off on a flight." But like, neither of those two seemed like reacting to it at all, which was interesting. But then I guess we had elements of when the first flight went down. Kachu kind of I don't know how much she knows about planes, but she could almost tell what parts of the plane were failing and what was kicking in and kicking out at different times, because she knew. She wasn't like panicking. She was sitting there being like, this is happening. Oh, we're screwed. Like she just knew what was happening. So maybe like as long as she can hear the right thing, she's comfortable. But I just thought that was an interesting note while I was reading, was that neither one of them seemed to be like forced back onto a flight. They seemed to be totally fine with it.
You know, to touch on that is the brilliant, how brilliant Kachu is back to Modesty Blaze. In the Modesty Blaze comic strips, Modesty Blaze, when she's 17 or 18, she's already in command of an international criminal organization. She's just one of those little geniuses, little Alexander Hamiltons, right? Kachu here, the reason Darcy's in love with her, but also she helped, make the Parker girls, even more profitable, because it had a lot to do with Kachu. And now Kachu is helping Tambi for about a year or so build his empire. So it doesn't seem, at first it doesn't seem plausible, but it's been done, I mean, I don't know if Moore has read the Modesty Blaze strips, but even if he hasn't, it doesn't really matter. But I saw parallels between Little Kachu and Little Modesty Blaze. When she's so young and yet so brilliant and yet so humane, because they're very kind people in the end. They really are. So anyway, brilliant stuff.
All right, that's a much happier note. So I think we should probably wrap up there and leave it at that. But we will be back in roughly a month's time, and we'll do our part 3. Hopefully, we'll have a full panel if we can get all 6 people that we had kind of planned. If not, whoever can make it will make it, and we're just gonna take it from there. Yeah, so I just want to thank all you guys for coming on, and Blackpoll for being the main kind of suggesting person for us kind of doing this, because as I said, as much as some of it hasn't been to my taste reading prose, it's been an enjoyable read so far, and I look forward to reading the last kind of third. And it's been a great chat with you guys, to kind of delve into something in a bit more kind of depth. So I look forward to the roundup.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting, Highland G. And gentlemen, it was a wonderful, wonderful conversation as always.
All right, so I just want to thank the audience for watching as well. My comment section is open after this ends, so you can leave comments under the video. Let us know what you think if you've read it yourself, or if you're planning on picking it up off the back of this. Hopefully we've not spoilt things too much for you to kind of jump into things, but I feel like this kind of book, even if you know what you're getting, even if you've read it before, as 3 of the 4 of us have, you can still get more out of it from a reread. So we could talk about everything, spoilers, and I still think you'd get something out of reading this book, because there's so much there. All right, but thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Adios.